Cool. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me quickly summarize the intent, the way I see it.
Okay.
We basically want to close a hole of like the public projects consuming unlimited amount of the minutes. Because like our terms of service says there is like 50,000, we even gonna probably like reduce that amount. Just today there is like no controls to define that or like to enforce that within the system. So the intent is basically like being able to um, configure that within the system and kind of make everyone adhere to this intent. From what I understand as a subtopic, we want to consider like two tiers of these free type minutes. The tier like of existing users, they're gonna have slightly bigger allowance, and the tier of the completely new users is gonna have smaller allowance of these 3 minutes. But the intent in general is like that everyone gonna have some amount of the minutes that is like clear and documented, presented, but it's not unlimited as it is today.
Yeah, I will add 2 things to that, and maybe I'm going to share my screen just because I think this has helped me think through it. Today, in our pricing page, we say that if you're a free customer on GitLab.com, you are allocated 2,000 CI pipeline minutes per group per month on our shared runners. And then if you're a public project, we say you get gold status. And so that means you get 50,000 pipeline minutes per month on our shared runners. And I think we want to reduce both of these. So the 2,000 would go down to 1,000, and maybe for free public projects, instead of saying you get everything in gold, you would get you get the gold features, but your pipeline allocated minutes is something less than 50,000. And to your point that we would enforce it. I think we consciously do not enforce it on public projects today, or at least like in code, we acknowledge that that is the case, but officially by our terms that somebody signed up with, they are capped and it's 50,000. Is that the same understanding as you?
Yes, I think it's the same. Probably like one thing that our procedures that evolve is like consideration of the public projects, which kind of like we kind of be more strict, like not considering the public projects as a separate tier, but rather making this still a part of the allowance that you receive.
Yeah.
So, but overall, I think like we look into like 2 type of the limits for the free, which is like the current plus the new users, and like the second case is like some projects can open source projects can just receive the gold status, gold tier, basically we for free pretty much, or whatever the terms are there.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm highlighting is there is that issue that I've added. The product issue 861 is meant to just be the R&D efforts, because there's separate like legal discussions and marketing changes that we would want to update the number of minutes on the web page, and can we legally adjust somebody's contract if they previously signed up under these terms. And that is why we kind of have to have that other tier, which is basically like, if you've already been allocated a quota, we're not going to adjust that as a result of this change. But for any new person who gets quota allocated, they would have that change adjusted. And that question is why I've put a high priority on, frankly, my own understanding of the customer application and how we add the quota. So, because we need to answer that question first and foremost. Because if we can just adjust how we apply the quota and it will only apply to new users and not existing users, then we can make the change to lower the amounts pretty immediately.
Okay, so, just let me describe exactly what different types of runners we have,
okay.
How they actually behave, and how we also run GitLab, because there seems to be some challenge like with ensuring that we don't break our workflow today,
Yeah.
which is like very heavy community focused. Let me share my screen. And I was also looking for the issue.
Oh, the one about credits or dollar minutes, of adjusting the type of. Is that the
Yes,
one you're looking for?
it's good, I think, to have that somewhere on back of our head, because it's actually okay. It's
Yeah,
actually
it's on the issue.
on
It
that.
is on follow-up steps. I named it enable pricing for multiple runner types.
But like it's quite connected like with what we want to achieve, and maybe we figure out like some small changes that gonna make this easier for the future generations.
Cool.
But I see that it's already added. There is nothing
But
public, there is nothing private in this issue. Are you aware of this issue and how it? What you
yeah,
see
I
issue?
am. But in my discussion with Josh on Friday, we kind of said it was a follow-up step because it's not needed to adjust the current one. But I'd love to hear your understanding of how maybe it is more connected than we're attributing it.
It really depends on how we approach that problem.
Okay.
Because it depending on the approach to this problem that we want to solve, the solution for this another issue could be basically for free. So I don't say that our intent is to solve this other issue, but depending on the approach, this issue can be solved pretty much for free. The
Okay.
other issue.
Yeah.
So types of runner, we have shared runners, instance-wide.
Hey, sorry, Camille, to interject, but would you mind actually throwing that in the Google Doc that I shared? Because then otherwise it's just gone if we.
I will copy that into the Google
All right,
Doc.
thank you.
It's easier for me to write it in VS Code for now.
All right, cool, thank you.
Because of the formatting and monotype font, it breaks severely when you try to do some things like that on Google Doc. But also like shared runners and things like that, they are part of the documentation. So, but to give you quickly summary of what types we have, let's continue that. Group runners, can be used by anyone. There is normally like a limit that would allow you to say that we disallow some groups or users to not use the shared type of runners. But there is like two types of the controls that you can use. Group runners are assigned to single group. So group runners internally can be assigned to multiple groups, but the current design is like that the group runner is assigned to the single group today. It doesn't matter whether this is like subgroup or top level group. Basically, every project that has the group runner assigned can use that runner.
And when you say single group, it would cascade down the hierarchy. If it was a top level group, all subgroups and eventual projects would have access. Okay.
Yes, but like you cannot assign the group runner to multiple concurrent groups. Let's say, like two different namespaces. If this is what you ask, project runners are assigned to many projects. So basically, as long as you have permissions, you can attach the given project runner to multiple projects. It doesn't matter the affinity of the groups. It's fully free, like freely allocatable system. You want in the project A that is in group A, it's no problem. If you want in the project B in group B, it's also not a problem. Project runners have the relation basically many to many, if this is how you like you could think about that.
But is that within a single group, or I guess like how does that make them different from shared runners? That's what I don't understand.
Shared, so like think about of that as different personas managing these runners. Shared runners are being managed by the system administrators that are managing GitLab and maybe managing the whole installation. Group runners are being managed by, like, let's say, DevOps of like the specific group, team, or whatever. Project runners, you maybe register the specific runner for like performing some complicated deployment to some of your production environments. So like these different levels are basically they are used to represent different personas managing these groups. Also, like, you cannot transform project runner into group runner and shared runner into group. There is no a way to migrate one runner to another type. There is also, the runner cannot be of multiple types. The runner always have the single type assigned.
Why is that? I guess I think of a runner as just like an endpoint that you register. Why couldn't you detach it as a shared runner and add it as a group runner?
So every runner, when it's created, it has assigned type.
Okay.
And it allows the usage of this type allows the management of this runner and like what type of the permissions are being executed and what is executing. This is information that is being used as a optimization factor. There is one reason. The second reason is it's not that you cannot do that. Probably we could implement a control that would allow you to migrate that, but it has a few security challenges connected with that. If you have a project runner that is assigned to two different groups, what you do with these project assignments if you move that to the group? Does it mean that this runner then is of two types, which is group and project, or whether you consider these that you migrate all relations to be a single or multiple group relations? So the decision to keep them non-migratable, be locked like that, it's basically based on the assumption that it's easy to register a new runner that serves a very specific intent, but it's very hard to provide you controls and ensure that our security aspects of managing that runner and migrating that between different types and ensuring that this representation is reflected, it's significantly more harder to do.
Okay.
So
and I guess if I'm an administrator of runners, I might have a runner on a virtual machine and I can just delete the actual runner code and reinstall it and re-register it just as easily and then you eliminate those security concerns. Okay.
Yes, and also you can it's super easy to register new runners, but it's not really easy to represent the same runner to be attached to multiple types. It's impossible to. I mean, structure allows you to have the runner assigned to group and project at the same time, but it's deliberately disallowing that because of the security concerns. It's quite troublesome to represent it to the users and provide them controls, and also interface is kind of becoming more complex, and there is a lot of downsides of doing it.
So what is the primary motivation though to have these different types? Is that permissions or access control? Like you mentioned security concerns. I don't quite understand why do we have this sort of breakdown at all, rather than just saying a runner is a runner and you assign whatever jobs you define it to run.
Why there are different types? Because there are different users using and managing these runners.
Okay, so and when you say user, you mean dependent. So there's different access control lists or something, different rights, different roles that are attached to those.
Consider ourselves. We have the shared runners that is used by everyone that is using GitLab.com. We have group runners that we assign for every project in that given group, which could be our runners. Consider project runners when you assign a very specific runner that can perform a deployment to only specific environment. And you don't want this runner that is assigned to the project to be shared between any other projects.
Right,
so you
right,
kind of
okay.
like you're limiting access controls or like usage patterns
Okay, so it's primarily like a
by
question of
limiting the
ownership,
context
basically.
in which it's running.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think, I don't know if this is a true statement, Camille, but I would imagine there's also like a cost control. Like if I'm the administrator of an instance, there's a certain amount of runners that I want to make available, but if the project wants to have more capacity or needs some unique capacity, they manage because it's kind of like bring your own compute. So they have to bring their own compute that is then isolated and only available to that project or group, and they're bearing the cost of that compute.
Yes, like maybe not really about the cost control, but more about the specific requirements control. It's much easier, basically. And like we know of organizations that just they bring their own runners because they need some fancy workflows to run, and it's just simpler than trying to provide that for everyone. But also like shared runners, because it's shared by everyone, you need to be additionally more careful exactly how you run that work, like this untrusted workload in this shared space. On the project runner, you always know that you're running only the given project. So there is like less likelihood of sharing some confidential data from your project secrets or whatever else, because you are not sharing the same like the same space with other projects that could be running on that. I mean, let's move on. It's not really that important, but it's good to like know exactly what type of levels we have. And basically, each project has an ability to enable, disable shared runners, enable, disable group runners. Basically, there is a button in the project settings when you can say, I want to use shared runners, I want to use group runners, and this kind of like a switch for the whole project. So you don't want to use group runners ever, you don't want to ever use shared runners, you always want to use only project runners. You can really limit that, and your project will be not using that. But let's kind of go into more shared runners territory. Shared runners for GitLab.com has slightly how to approach that. Okay, shared runners for GitLab.com has a controls build that allows you to assign or more like that allows you to validate amount of the minutes that you are consuming. And the CI minutes is only a property of the shared runner. It's not a property of the group, and it's not a property of the project runner. It's based on the assumption that like if you are running the big instance, you are sharing the resources. Group project, it's like much smaller entity, so we don't need to have additional controls of the usage on the smaller entities. So like we are only tracking amount of the minutes that you consumed on the shared runners. Then shared runner minutes is not a property of the runner. It's not that like runner defines every group, namespace, or project can use that amount of the minutes. It's rather like every project receives some allowance of the project, sorry, of the minutes that can use across all available shared runners. For example, shared runners, maybe it's not only about shared runners, but basically runners have a concept of a tax. Tags define, for example, let's say type of the machine, the size, maybe amount of the compute. So we don't really, sorry, I'm losing words. There is this discussion about like some kind of metric to measure different type of the sizes of the machines. We don't really do that today. So we consider each runner that is marked as shared to be of the same of the same cost. And basically, the algorithm today, it's very simple. Like there are like two level of the limitations. So search runners. If I would like describe the search runners in the most have tags, so basically can represent different machine sizes, for example. Also, the search runners pick only projects, only jobs from projects that have CI minutes available. CI minutes consumed is a property of a namespace, which could be like group or user, and the amount of available CI minutes is a property of a namespace group. So you may be asking now, like, how the counting works. So basically, counting of the minutes works that as soon as there are basically like two gates. Gate A, it's like when we check whether like the runner can pick a job, which is like on the requesting phase. Runner looks for jobs with consumed minutes less than minutes limit. And basically, this is gate A, but gate B, maybe it's not really like a gate, but more like the accounting. We count a number, like, sorry, we append, we accumulate amount of the minutes that is being used post job. So basically, when the job finishes, so when the job finishes, we then accumulate CI minutes being consumed for a given namespace. So there is like one assumption built into that system, which in some cases is wrong, but it's much easier to model. Its assumption is that like the system allows you to escape the limit because we validate amount of the consumed minutes before actually executing the workload. So for example, you consume 59 minutes out of your 60 allowed minutes. We don't really know ahead of the time how long your job gonna take. If your job now takes 60 minutes, we're just gonna then append that 60 minutes to your counter, which can result in 119 minutes being consumed. So like we escape the limit, but it's based on the assumption that the limits are much higher than like the granularity of the job or like how long this job can execute, because we have the global time limit for the jobs execute on the search runners, I think set to something around either 2 or 3 hours. So each job executed can take no more than this allowed timeout. So if you look at the 2000 minutes, we may escape these 2000 minutes by amount of the jobs that are being picked at the given time multiplied by this maximum duration that is allowed for your job to execute. And this was like the aspect of the system that was being abused by the abusers, because they would fire, for example, 100 jobs in the private project, and each of these jobs would take 3 hours, and basically they would escape this limit quite significantly. But it doesn't seem to be like really a problem in the normal use case, because we are quite aggressive on killing Bitcoin miners, but this aspect of the system makes it very easy to model, because we check before and we accumulate after there was like one extension being thought to this process. Like if we discover that gate B did fire or whatever else, so you did go over the limit, you would proactively go and cancel all your existing jobs to ensure that you are not consuming any more minutes as of now. This was like one extension that was considered. And as for the accumulation currently deliberately ignores public projects. This is by design, and this is also like the original idea behind that. That we really wanted to limit the private projects and internal projects, but the public projects, since they are open, we allowed basically to consume pretty much unlimited resources, which was in some cases been abused. So now, like there is how the CI minutes or like CI minutes limit is being set, because there are like two ways how this limit can be set, and this is exactly how it currently functions. We have the customers GitLab.com portal, which basically we link namespace with a customer, and this portal uses API to set amount of available minutes on according to a plan. But this portal, I think it only looks at the paid users. So it has basically zero knowledge about the free users. And for the free users, what we do is like for free users, we have application setting where there is like CI/CD minutes limit or something of sorts. So basically, this CI/CD minutes limit takes precedence. Sorry, it doesn't take precedence. This CI/CD minutes limit is a fallback if there is no more granular limit set for a given namespace. So for example, if the namespace is being set by this customer's GitLab.com portal to, let's say, 4,000, this limit gonna be used and this limit gonna be enforced. If this limit is like not set, we're gonna use the limit that is set to the GitLab.com system-wide instance, which is application settings and CI/CD minutes limit. So this limit is actually like the only limit that you have for any other user that doesn't have a specific limit set, basically. So how like now build minutes additions work? Basically, customers go to this customers GitHub.com, build additional minutes, then this site uses API and basically increases your limit temporarily from, let's say, 50,000 to 60,000 or 80,000 or whatever else. And basically it manages that specific setting on your namespace. So from GitLab perspective, from GitLab.com perspective, this information about the CI/CD limits is disconnected from the plan. The plan is completely a separate feature that gives you information about the licensing of the features, but doesn't really enforce anything about allowed quotas that you can use for the CI/CD space. Then the interesting question is like how GitLab ourselves, how we do work, because this is so how we run GitLab. We run CI for GitLab repositories. Basically, we use a mix of all possible runners. Like we have project runners, which are named private GitLab runners manager. It's basically auto-scaled architecture. It is assigned to some of our projects, which is like the projects that are being used by majority of the GitLab, which is GitLab, GitLab False, Security GitLab, and Omnibus GitLab, and whatever else the projects are there. We probably also have the group
Camille, when
runners.
you said the ones we use for GitLab repositories, is that just gitlab.org, or does that also include gitlab.com?
No, I'm talking about our workflow. I'm not talking about the people running a workflow not related to.
Oh, sorry. What I mean
GitLab
was
repository.
the top level group is gitlab.org group or gitlab.com group.
It doesn't matter. It's pretty much the same.
Okay. We use
because
a mix in both.
Because why it is the same? Because like www.gitlab.com, it's also a repository that is being contributed by external community members. So it's like the process for these repos is basically the same.
Okay.
It doesn't differ.
Okay.
Probably we have some assigned to gitlab.org, gitlab.com. I can even check probably whether we have. Actually curious. Okay, yes, we actually have group runners assigned. So we also use group runners. We use a bunch of the shared runners and we use a bunch of the group runners. So if I would add to that, probably something like that. And we also use shared runners because we need to support forks, basically. Basically, like the project runners, group runners allows you to only run the CI within the given project or like the given group. But forks, usually they are the projects that are living in the separate namespaces. So currently today, there is no function that would allow you to inherit the runner from your parent project. For example, you have OS6 runner assigned to your Fastlane project on the gitlab.com, and you want every one of your contributors to use this OS6 runner. There is no ability to do that today. So it's kind of like a limiting factor because we have to then register as shared runners because we need to support forks. Basically, all forks run on the shared runners, and the runners that are being named basically like that. It kind of indicates that these are the shared runners that are meant to be used for GitLab internal purposes. They just have different tags, which is GitLab.org. Why it is important that I mentioned? It's important for two reasons. Like first, this is the only way to run forks today, because like these GitLab shared runners are more optimized to run this workflow. They don't run in the privilege mode, so we don't have to recycle machines every time. Also, just because they run only our workload, so there is no that security issues. But the second reason is that we can make them shared runners because they run public projects, so they do not differ anywhere else from the existing shared runners. Because basically, like you have shared runners that are for GitHub and for everyone else. And basically, accounting of the minutes, if someone would use GitLab Shared Runners Manager, would work basically the same. There is no accounting for the public, but there is accounting for the private projects. So if someone would decide, because there is no way in a system to limit that, for example, project COQ that we disallow this project to use the GitLab org shared runners. There is no mechanism in the system that would allow you to model that because it was not needed. So basically, like we have two types of the shared runners, which is like actually, to be exactly clear, for GitLab, which is like with Linux, with Docker, with non-privileged modes, optimized basically. For everyone else, like we have with Linux, with Docker, with privileged mode, throw away machines basically. And the third case is like something that we introduce Windows and later OS 6 machines, which is like with this respective system, which are always throw away machines. So these are basically like three types of the shared runners that we have today. Two types are important basically. Like we have GitLab shared runners and for everyone else shared runners. There is no
How does
like,
someone, like, if I create another project on GitLab, can I say I want to use the 4 GitLab shared runners, or is that decision already made for me? Which shared runners I would use?
like if you know what to put in your GitLab CI YAML, yes, like you can do it.
Okay.
It's not really like a big deal, to fair, because if you use that for the private projects, it's gonna consume minutes. If you use for the public projects, even if you use that, it's gonna be more efficient and more cost effective for us effectively. We don't really want you to do it, but it was never really like a problem so far in these few years from now.
But would that be would that be a way to kind of like attack us from the perspective of kind of stealing compute away for like GitLab company purposes, you know, because I don't know, you run, you know, hundreds of thousands of your projects on our shared runners, or is that not a concern?
You talk about, you ask about today, or you ask about tomorrow?
Yeah, like just if I create a random group or project and I assign jobs to run with the runners that run, you know, all of the GitLab internal stuff as well. Is there like an opportunity for someone to slow us down, basically?
Not really. It's like we have pretty extensive architecture. Like we have multiple layers of runners. We have the private runners that kind of like process majority of the data, and basically group runners are mostly used by like say 50% is forks, 50% is something different. So not really today. But if we change a model, there's gonna be a small security issue that's gonna have to be addressed in the future. Because now, like, let's consider the shared runners case. We need to continue using that for GitLab for time being, whatever we do. But the problem is like, we don't likely want our community contributors to have limit to contribute to GitLab, basically. So like you basically need to say on the GitLab shared runners, which can still everyone use, there is no limit on the amount of the minutes being used. So when someone discovers that aspect of the system, it could basically use GitLab shared runners for unlimited purposes, as it is happening today. It basically comes from the problem of the lack of easy way for sharing, or like sharing the, but does it really so much different from like someone, if someone wants to still compute, it's gonna create a fork in whatever model and it's gonna push a merge request to create a ton of pipelines and it's gonna execute. So this becomes like a hole for people wanting to run their own public projects without like using unlimited. Okay, it's like two tangents on a point. This is so shared runners. This is like the way how we run forks today. there is not really like another way to run forks today, as of now, because you need one of two features to run forks differently, which is like either you designate some runners to be shared with the forks and run in the context of the fork, or whether you mark that you want the merge request from the fork to be run in the context of your parent project, which is like, we don't have neither of these features yet, but it's of course being planned in the future. So this is something that's going to be improved in the next milestones.
And just so I'm maybe understanding a connection here, that would mean if we had the ability to like assign, or like I think of it as a checkbox in the CI settings for a group that said, anyone who forks from these projects can use my group runners, then we actually wouldn't need the 4 GitLab shared runners. Is that right?
Yes, something of that sort. Like there are like two approaches to solving that problem, really, and like this is like the second of the approach that you can take to solve the problem.
Okay, because it sounds like you were saying the only reason why we need those like unique or 4 GitLab shared runners is because we want to support forks. And if we have some way to do that through group runners that are available to other projects that aren't in our group, but are because they're forks, we could just use GitLab group runners for.
Yes. So basically, if there would be some way for you to reuse the same runners that you have today assigned to your project and designate some of these runners either to be shared or mark some of these runners as runners that can run untrusted workflow, which may be which could be a case that like you make your merge request pipeline from the fork to run in the context of the parent, then you don't really need the shared runners for the GitLab repositories, because this problem is solved differently.
Gotcha.
This is, I mean, it's done today because this is the only way to supporting forks, and it's the only way to be more cost effective when running GitLab. Otherwise, you would be using everyone else's shared runners, which are significantly more expensive because they are throwaway machines, technically.
Gotcha.
And GitLab runners, they by default run multiple subsequent jobs on the same machine, which increases the cost effectiveness because you are not removing and recreating the machine over and over, which has some implications on additional cost.
Gotcha.
In the cloud.
Can I go back to something you said about where free users' plans are? So the customer team pointed me to some lines of code that they say outlines the plan and has a free plan, but I wonder if that is just some code that's not actually used. I just pasted it in here, but it has one line that says free plan is 2,000, but I'm wondering if you're saying actually that line is never used. It's actually only that instance-wide setting that is setting the free.
I may be completely. Okay. It's actually customers GitLab.com. So I don't know exactly how the free plan works in that, but I don't think that every namespace in a GitLab has the limit assigned.
Yeah. Okay.
Because this is external service that is tracking the known namespaces. I don't think that it's tracking every namespace.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
that makes sense. So adjusting the change here wouldn't actually achieve what we were looking for. We would need to also adjust that number that setting, instance-wide setting.
So there are two aspects really, multiple aspects to address. As for the limitations, to make distinction on free plan between existing and new users, because like current modeling allows you to set a single limit for the free plan. So probably it's even more twisted, because maybe what happens here is like if user stops using like the paid plan, this is probably the limit that is going to be used for that user.
Yeah.
So it
Or if
means,
they have some interaction with, like they could purchase extra minutes, but there are ways that you can interact with customer while still on the free plan, but signing up is not one of them. And I think that's the problem.
So probably like the case is like that you have a free plan with an explicit amount of minutes allowed. You have the free plan without any minutes set, which basically then use application settings CI minutes. And basically, these are probably two types of the free plan. Do we have another free plan?
No, I mean, I think they have trials and other things like that. Maybe a trial, after your trial ended, you would have been registered in customer and then moved back to a free plan. And maybe that would have it set.
So this is one case. The second case is how we support shared runners GitLab repositories workflow for forks, because like whatever we do, we cannot really start counting the case of usage of our runners for our internal purposes, which may, unless there is better feature for migrating the shared runners of GitLab to be like the group shared runners, sorry, the project shared with the fork runners or whatever. It's like this one with these two cases. It potentially opens us to some potential small security hole related to the cost.
Yeah. Cool. Camille, you were going somewhere about how the importance of runner, you call them like dollar minutes, or this alternative rather than just using minutes might help with this specific issue. I'd started thinking that it was a separate concern. Can you highlight that for me?
I mean, it's not really like about the importance of that issue, but it really depends on how we implement the modeling of these aspects. And if we, basically this issue could be pretty much like the first iteration be done for free if we choose different way of modeling these aspects. So I don't think like that my intent is to solve this other issue, but I want to like to keep this issue from the back of the head, to think exactly if you would have to implement this issue, how we would do that. Because maybe by doing very small change to like solving these aspects, we can basically get this issue in the initial form for free.
Okay.
But it really depends on how we want to model and how we want to address these aspects, which are like the main goal at here. Because like I had my perception how it could be done, but I don't want to spoil it yet. let's talk about like the ideas still.
Cool. The only idea I have is that one I suggested of using group. I do think of them as separate. I was thinking a path forward would be immediately adjust in our marketing plans the amount that we say we're going to give to 1,000 and 10,000 for 1,000 for private projects and 10,000 for public projects, and then we have to figure out whether or not we have to figure out how we can grandfather, but we can start publicizing that so anyone who signs up afterwards, we can just we didn't violate any terms of their contract, but we can say we're going to do it first, figure out how we can enable current people to have their extra ones or have their current quota, and then adjust their quota, and then plug the holes of the existing system when it comes to public projects. And when doing that, make sure that we don't mess up forks. And maybe by that time we'll have this group runners used in fork contexts that would enable us individually to solve for it. So that was how.
So sorry, can you say like the last sentence?
That if we have that issue that you mentioned that's scheduled for 12.10, if that issue ended up being enabling a project to allow the project's runners, if that enabled the group to allow the group's runners to be able to use in fork contexts, then we would kind of solve the question mark of applying. Like I get the sense that we can't apply the public project quota today because it would ruin our workflow. So we can't just say, oh, tomorrow we're going to start enforcing 10,000 minute quotas or 50,000 limit quotas on public projects, because it would ruin Siemens and those other customers we talked about who are consuming shared runner minutes in an effort to contribute to GitLab. But if we can enable GitLab specifically to provide access to those minutes in that by having it be the group runners when in fork context, then we can plug the hole of the public projects having kind of unlimited quota today.
So I think like my sentiment behind that topic is that it's very hard like to do it right. So I would not base our approach on this issue to be solved in that given milestone.
Okay.
And also like being rolled out, because I think we could be disappointed that it's not gonna be done, or like it's not gonna be working properly as we expect. So I would rather like make us think about the concept that allow us to model these aspects without dependence on that, by like acknowledging that could be like this small security hole that's gonna be solved by like people shipping that feature to which we migrate over time, but it's still significantly better like than it's today, but like we are not dependent on this being shipped or not shipped. Because like now, if we are dependent on this being shipped or not shipped, if this is not shipped, basically we cannot start enforcing anything, which is basically quite terrible. And I think like our goal is to start enforcing, like maybe some kind of workflows removing from this new quota mechanism, and basically migrating our infrastructure to something that is more secure, which is like this issue that is scheduled for the 12.10 basically doing.
Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, that's decoupling from reliance on that 12.10 issue. That makes sense to me.
I'm actually started thinking like how we could solve the chance distinction between existing and the new users. And I think that this is pretty simple one to solve. Because like if you would prefill all the existing tables with the limit as of now, this would be like the limit that the system would start using for the private projects. Now, if we change customers and application settings to a new limit, all new users would start using new limits, basically. And basically,
Is that true? I thought you were saying that application settings, so if a new person signs up on GitLab, they never touch customers, they never get an explicit limit, if they sign up today, and then tomorrow we change it, they're gonna get the new application settings limit, not the one that was set today, right?
this is the point A for that particular purpose. Like we go through every namespace that is today that doesn't have limit set, and we set a limit
And set it, got it.
explicitly. So
Okay.
like we basically we mark all the existing projects at the time, sorry, all the existing namespace at the time of executing migration to have the specific limit, because we can allow, we can configure the per project.
Okay.
And all the new projects will not have that information set. So
they'll
they're
get
gonna
the
start
application
using
setting.
the application settings limit, which is gonna be like the new limit that we decide to do.
Cool. I like it. That makes sense to me. So that would involve deciding on the number, doing the DB migration for anyone who's prior to that date, and then setting a new limit in both of those places. Okay.
Then we have the challenge of the accounting public projects and like figuring out how to not account GitLab workflow oriented forks. Maybe let's finish for today. It's like
Okay.
it's 1 hour already.
Late for you guys. Yeah.
I'm gonna paste that that information into the issue that you have.
Perfect. Yeah.
So like we could continue discussing that further, but like this should give you some rough idea about what we need to address.
Yeah. Super helpful. Thank you, Camille. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining in.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much, Camille.
And I'll post the video. It might need to be private, but I'll post it for everyone. Cool. Thanks, gents.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.